Bro, Beowulf. Why should I read this? How do I read this? Those are the questions we're working on today. This being a new translation of Beowulf by Maria Dahvana Headley, which is awesome, super fun. So why should I read this? The first answer to that question, and we'll get into it more as I move through this video, which could be 15 minutes long, is why should I read this? Because it's fun. You need to take yourself back to another time and place, because Beowulf was originally written, it comes out of the, we could say, it came out of the mists of antiquity. Before we had a written language, before English existed as we know it, we're talking about maybe 700 AD, maybe 1000 AD, when Beowulf came out of the mists of antiquity is disputed. It is controversial. It is the kind of thing that people argue about that care about stuff like that. So it was written in a different language. It was written in Old English. So I'm going to start drawing some arrows here, giving you some information. Old English is the language it was written in. In fact, I'm going to show you exactly the language that it was written in on this other piece of paper that I'm getting right here. Here it is there. Huet, hue, gardena, and gear dagum. I went to a video online. I listened to a guy read that line, and I do not know how to read this language because you have to be a real scholar. You have to be real hardcore to learn how to speak this language, which is Old English. And that is when the poem was first written down, which was around 1000 probably, it was written down in Old English. We have one existent copy. It's in the British Library. That's awesome. Old English is also known as Anglo-Saxon. And it was spoken in Britain, 700 to 1000. It's really a Germanic language. So what you're reading here, what we're going to read here, is a translation of something that is 1,000 years old. Old English in 1066 underwent another change, and this is why am I telling you this? I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to me. We had something called the Norman invasion or Norman conquest. A very consequential event in human history. The Normans spoke French, and they were Christian, although they were descended some generations from Vikings, and they conquered the Isle of Britain, and they injected to this Old English. So we've got this Old English here, or as I like to call it, OE. I got this Old English right here, and they took that Old English and they injected a bunch of French into this Old English, OE. So the Norman conquest in 1066 was really a French injection. Words, grammar, a lot of Latin. So we have German-based language, huge French injection. We end up with something that came to be known as Middle English, which we can almost understand. Middle English. We can almost understand Middle English. In fact, Chaucer wrote towards the end of the Middle English period, and we can kind of understand Chaucer without any special training. Kind of, almost. And Chaucer is like the first literary giant of the English language. So that's a good date, 1400. So it's like after 1400. Once we get to like 1450, 60s, 1500, 1450 and onward, we're really talking about something that's modern English, which, if you've read Shakespeare and said, oh my gosh, this is a different language, it's not. Shakespeare's written it's archaic, it's old. Some of the terms are normally used, but grammar-wise, structure-wise, Shakespeare's modern English. Chaucer, Middle English, Old English, Anglo-Saxon, which means we've got some excitement, because if you're going to read something that was written 1,000 years ago in a different language, it's going to be translated. And if you're going to translate, I'll talk about one word. What, I believe is how that's pronounced, what. This translator, who's Seamus Heaney, and is an excellent, excellent poet, he translates that word to so. Well, what and so, this is the kind of thing that poets are interested in. So. That doesn't sound like what. What sounds a lot more like hey. Or, as Maria Dahvana Headley has ingeniously done, bro, tell me. We still know how to speak of kings. How fun is that? So going back to our two initial questions. Why should I read this? Well, it's fun. If you like Marvel comics, if you like Thor, if you like Vikings, if you like heroes, if you like monsters, that's Beowulf. That's what it's all about. I'm going to highlight it. Beowulf. Monsters. Revenge. It's also really interesting because it's these Anglo-Saxons here, they were pagans. So they had a whole different worldview of right and wrong, justice, injustice, what happens after you die, what you should do when you live. And these Normans were Christian, early Christians. And those two worldviews come together. They clash in Beowulf, which is really interesting. It's kind of like a pagan mythology wearing a little Christian suit. So that makes it fun and interesting. What else? How do I read this? Let's move on. So this is now like part 2, why you should read it. Let me read it. Let me read you one stanza, and then maybe you'll, in your mind, you'll be like, okay, I guess that's why I should read this. Bro, tell me we still know how to speak of kings. In the old days, everyone knew what men were. Brave, bold, glory-bound. Only stories now, but I'll sound the Spear Dane's song, hoarded for hungry times. So, how? This is going to be like some, this is like a how-to. So I guess I'll just number them and say how. First, don't be scared. Bros, don't be scared, bro. These are sentences. You know how to read sentences, right? You've done that before. Look at this. Here's a period. I'm just gonna highlight these things there. Look, there's a period right there. Oh my gosh, it's a period. That's nothing to be afraid of. That's a sentence. This is even a sentence right here, because we had an exclamation point. Bro, tell me we still know how to speak of kings. In the old days, everyone knew what men were. Brave, bold, glory-bound. Period. Only stories now, but I'll sound the Spear Dane's song, hoarded for hungry times. So, don't be scared, bro. And 2, read sentences. You've done that before. In fact, when you're reading through for your first time, you could ignore these line endings. They're there, and they're there for a reason that I'll talk about in a moment, but recognize that what you are reading is sentences. The first father was a foundling, Sild Sifing. He spent his youth fists up, browbeating every barstool brother, bonfiring his enemies. That man began in the waves, a baby in a basket. But he bootstrapped his way into a kingdom, trading loneliness for luxury. Whether they thought kneeling necessary or no, everyone from head to tail of the whale road bent down. There's a king, there's his crown. That was a good king. Read sentences. Now, what are the tools that a poet works with? What is a poet trying to do? A lot of people, when they think of poems, so I'm just going to write this as a number 3. I'm going to call it Poet's Toolkit. Poet's Toolkit. A poet's toolkit, it's got some things in it that you're probably aware of. One of them is called rhyme. They may or may not use rhyme. They may say, that's a good tool, but it's not the tool that I want to use for this line. And then sometimes they do. Like right here, we have down and crown. Okay, there's also internal rhymes. The big thing that you need to be aware of when you're reading poetry is that the language is really carefully put together for the maximum effect, maximum power in language. So rhyme is a tool. Alliteration is a big tool. Alleration. Illiteration. I may have spelled that word wrong. That's why I just kind of, go over a little, Alliteration. Alliteration is like the repeating of the beginning. So the sound. So sound is really important. In fact, I'm going to make that its own thing because you got to read it aloud. That's should be my number one how. Number one how. Read aloud. Now, if you're in a classroom or something, and this is your assigned text to read, try not to have too much fun with it by reading it aloud. But if your lips move a little bit, you're going to get more out of it. Even if your lips just barely move while you're trying to think about. Poetry is an art form where the instrument that is being played is your body. The sound that's moving through your body, the sound of your vocal cords, the sound as you shape syllables. That's all part of poetry. So you got to read it aloud. Sound matters. And this is why, for example, I take issue with great poet Seamus Heaney, who's a great poet, one of the great poets. Original, hat ve gardena in ger dagum. So, the spear Danes in days gone by. What? That's not the right tone, bro. What? So. No. What? Bro. That's the way it's supposed to sound. Sound matters most, I will say. Sound matters most in poetry. So alliteration is part of the sound because it sounds a little different when you say brave, bold, glory bound, hoarded for hungry times. All that is part of the meaning. It's like a spell. It's like a spell is being cast. And if it's a successful spell, you'll get caught up in the story, transported to another time, where some really crazy and scary stuff happens. So we've got rhyme, we've got alliteration. We have got, now I'm going to talk about the punctuation and the lines, because that's always confusing. Why, if it doesn't matter, I'm supposed to just read sentences, why does it stop here, and why does it stop there, and why does it stop there? Because that creates tension. So there's tension. And tension, is what makes you pay attention to something. What? Something's going on here? What's happening? There's tension in the balance between syntax, which has to do with sentences. So syntax is like period, that's the end of a sentence, end of a sentence. Tension between syntax and line. And sometimes that tension makes you, and I'm going to put a little bracket here because I'm going to talk about 2 different ways that this works. This is like, you don't even have to know this to get the most out of reading a poem. You just have to read it. And try to perform it in your mind if you can't read it out loud, or try to sing it out. Sing it, Make the language sing. It's a celebration of language, poetry is. We also have tension between stressed and unstressed syllables. So certain words pop out as like the And this is just from the regular rhythm that we speak. We speak in rhythms. So really, in truth, we speak poetry to each other all the time. Bro, tell me we still know how to speak of kings. Like, you don't say, bro, tell me we know how to speak of kings. Or like, tell me we still know how to speak of kings in the old days. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's a rhythm that's captured in the way that certain syllables are stressed and other syllables are unstressed. Everyone knew what men were. Everyone knew. Everyone knew. The way that the three syllables of everyone, it makes you land on that word knew. Like, and so it has emphasis. Everyone knew what men were. Brave, bold, glory bound. Here's a little tension because we have a new sentence starting. So there's a break right here, but it's not the end of a line. So we have only stories now. But here's where it is. I'll just write it right here. It's speed up and slow down is what it is. The tension is like, sometimes, you ever tell somebody to go faster and someone else tells you to go slower at the same time? That's what poetry does a lot for tension. Speed up, slow down at the same time. So the line right here is telling you that it's the last word of the line, but the way that the syllables are stressed and the way that the word only sounds makes you want to just crash right into story. So you want to speed up right here. And so that creates a little bit of a tension as you're reading. And if you're aware of that, the poet did it on purpose. The other thing that is a key feature of Anglo-Saxon, which makes it so, this translation is quite different than other translations. Well, in the original Anglo-Saxon, in the original Old English, word order is really flexible. So in the original, where adjectives are placed and different things like that there's like a wide variation. And that's a feature of the language. So if we have an Old English where word order is very flexible, that means that the translator's job is really poetic. Like, they can really play with that language. Another thing that's appropriate, and this will be the last one, is tone. What is the tone? The tone is like that has to do with that sound too. You read the tone, and it's like the poet tells you through the lines, through things like bootstrapped. He bootstrapped his way into a kingdom. Bootstrapped. How does that word sound? It doesn't sound like you should say it like, but he bootstrapped his way into a kingdom. No, he bootstrapped his way and the tone is started right there. Bro, he bootstrapped his way into a kingdom. So enjoy the poem. I don't know if I'll do more of these. I might move on in the future to talk about Chaucer. Because Beowulf is a good place to start. If you're going to end up to go through Chaucer, then you're going to go through Shakespeare. That's kind of fun. So enjoy the poem. Again, this is the version that we are reading. It is outstanding. It is super fun. It has a gorgeous cover, and it's brand new.